why maybe a tarantula wouldn't be the pet for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I am feeling honestly a little unmotivated. It's really cold here. I feel like it's January 71st. I'm really over it. But I thought maybe we could just do a sit down video and have a little bit of a discussion. So today I wanted to talk about why tarantulas make great pets. Of course, there are some cons, I guess, but the pros definitely outweigh them in my opinion. So today we're gonna go over them. And as always, I definitely encourage you to leave some comments down below and give me your pros and cons. So of course, let's talk about the pros first. Oh yeah, before we get started, I wanted to thank Sean, Thomas, and Cheyenne for joining my Patreon. Thank you guys so much for the extra support. And let's just get into this video. So the first pro in keeping a tarantula is that their setup is really inexpensive, especially in comparison to other animals. If you go get a reptile, you're usually going to need to get specific lighting, supplements, different foods. Say you go with a fish, you're going to want to go get a tank and a filter and a heater and everything you need for that. So all these initial investments can end up costing a lot for a pet, which is expected. Pets do cost money. But with a tarantula, it's so much less expensive and so much simpler. You can go with a really easy plastic enclosure. Critter keepers are great. Storage bins are also great. You can go to pretty much any store and find a storage bin. Bedding wise, you're just going to need some dirt, a hide, and a water dish if you're going to be using a water dish, which I do recommend. But as for the water dish, I'm not saying go buy the $7 water dish that looks like a rock from PetSmart. I'm saying get a water bottle cap and use that, because chances are the tarantula is going to be making it a part of its enclosure anyway, and you're probably going to end up with like 20 bottle caps in the enclosure after a while. You don't need any heating, you don't need any lighting. So that makes it really easy for just about anybody to afford that initial investment. So next we're going to talk about the fact that you don't really need to clean them in the same way that you do other animals. Let's just put in comparison, for hamsters, you're going to be needing to change their bedding probably once or twice a month, not completely, but you will be taking some bedding out, putting some new bedding in. With tarantulas, you don't do that. You do not ever have to change their substrate. There are only two reasons why I would ever even consider changing a tarantula's substrate. One would be mold issues and one would be mite issues. But a lot of times you can even resolve both of those without even changing the substrate. It just really depends on what kind of mold or mites. The best thing to fix usually those issues is to dry out the enclosure. So tarantulas do not smell. They're not going to smell if their cage gets dirty. When they actually go to the bathroom, it looks kind of like bird poop, but it's super small and it somehow just kind of disappears. Like you'll get it maybe on the glass of some enclosures and you can wipe that down, which I usually do. Sometimes you need to scrape it off a little bit, but it's not a big deal. So next we will talk about how inexpensive they are to maintain. Tarantulas do not eat daily. They don't even always eat weekly, especially adults. They're going to eat maybe once every 2 weeks, depending on the size of their meal. Also, since you're not going to be having to take out substrate and replacing it and stuff regularly, then you don't need to be reinvesting over and more bags of substrate like you do with like snakes and aspen or hamsters in their paper bedding. As much as I hate to say it, if a tarantula gets sick, there's no vet that's going to be able to treat it. So you don't actually have to worry about vet costs like you would for a reptile or other small animal. So overall, they're really just not going to cost you a lot long term. The most expensive thing itself will be the actual spider most of the time. The next point I want to make is the fact that there is a tarantula species out there for everyone. People ask me all the time what I think the best beginner species is. I even made a video about it talking about a few of my favorites, but I have to be honest, that is completely subjective and completely up to you. There's just a species out there for everyone. If you really like colorful spiders, you can go with a Caribbean versicolor or a green bottle blue as your first. If you like darker tarantulas, then the Grammostola pulchra is a great option. Brown ones, pink ones, literally it's completely up to you. If you like little tarantulas, a pumpkin patch is great. If you like big tarantulas and you want something a little bit more feisty, a great option would be like an Acanthoscurria geniculata or a Nandutrapepi. There's literally so much that you can choose from. There's always going to be a good fit for somebody, like what they're looking for. And I always recommend that you start off with the tarantula that you really want to keep. Like, you can ask me or anybody or any experts in the Facebook groups what the best beginner tarantula species is. But if you are set on a species and you research that species, I think you should get that species. Just my opinion though. And one of the biggest reasons why I think that they make great pets is because they're super hardy and long-lived. If it's a female, she can live probably up to 30 years. If it's a male, 5 years, sometimes 10. Regardless, you're going to be having this pet for a really long time and they're going to be really low maintenance. So I guess let's talk about the cons, why maybe a tarantula wouldn't be the pet for you. I guess the most obvious one is the fact that they're venomous, and some people can't get over that fact. I will say that most tarantulas' venom is comparable to like a bee sting or a wasp sting. Of course, there are more potent venom species out there, but you don't have to go with one of those species. And let me just remind you guys that a tarantula bite is not lethal. Of course, bites don't even happen like often or regularly at all. Don't let it scare you away. Another con, they're not really a pet that you're going to be able to handle a lot, nor should you handle them a lot. I don't really recommend handling. Of course, I do handle, so I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say don't handle. Like, it's your tarantula and you can decide what you do with it, but I would keep it to a minimum and make sure that it's like a species that will tolerate it, because some species will tolerate it more than others. But generally, you're not going to be handling it a lot, and it's just not a pet that's going to want to come out and be handled. And going off of that, we should also mention that you can't tame a tarantula and they're not going to bond with you. So they have a really simple nervous system. They're not going to ever understand that you are not a threat. They're never going to understand that you are their owner. They're never going to get used to handling. That's not how it works. With a reptile, they do have that capacity to learn and kind of get that familiarity or kind of become accustomed to being handled. Tarantulas don't have that ability, so they're never going to, over time, somehow tolerate handling better. It's always going to be unpredictable. Going off of that, I'm just going to throw it out there that they're not social animals. They don't want to come out and socialize with you. A lot of people that don't really keep tarantulas will question me sometimes why my enclosures are so small. And the reason why is because they don't really come out of their burrows in the wild or in captivity. That's where they spend like 90% of their time usually, is inside of a burrow. They're opportunistic animals. So really in the wild, they just kind of go in their burrow and wait for like an insect to walk by and then they eat. That's about it. So you can set them up in like a 10-gallon or something like that, but it's just not really worth it. Some people prefer that, and that's totally fine, but generally they're going to make their home in a really small burrow and never leave the burrow because they just want to be in that confined, small, dark space. They don't want to come out really. I guess the top con is that they are a little bit fragile. So I know I said that they are generally hardy and long-lived. That doesn't mean that physically they're not fragile creatures. They really are. Their abdomens are super soft and they're not protected at all. Also, you have to be careful about other things, like if you use any sprays in your house. I don't burn scented candles or incense or anything like that. Like, if you kind of look into smells that will repel a tarantula, I think like pine is one of them, lavender. We don't really know how that would affect one in captivity if like you have a tarantula and then you're burning like a lavender candle next to it. And if you have cats, be really careful, because I read these horror stories all the time about a cat going and knocking an enclosure down and then the spider getting out or getting eaten or, you know, rupturing its abdomen. Basically, just be responsible. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, isn't it? All right, so that's all I have for this video. Please comment down below. Let me know what your pros and cons of keeping tarantulas are. I love when discussions happen down below. It always is really nice when I see people helping each other and giving their experiences, because that's how we learn in this hobby. We base our information off of other people's experiences before we have our own experiences. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like this video if you did. Subscribe if you're not. And you want to be. Don't forget that I have an Instagram that I use probably way too much. It's at Tarantula.kat. You can go follow me there. I also have a Patreon, which is linked down below, and I will see you guys soon. Thank you so much.